Hello, I'm here with author Annie Try. Hello, Annie.
Hello.
And Annie has written this young adult book called The Dangerous Dance of Emma JJ. A lifetime of being in care and coping with disturbing memories has made Em desperate to be normal. That includes finding out about her father and meeting her grandparents. But what she learns is devastating. Her ambition to dance professionally, her relationships and her identity all threaten to come crashing down. Who can she turn to for the help she needs? So that is the gripping blurb on the back of The Dangerous Dance of Emma JJ, and I'm going to talk with Annie a bit about what's in the book and how she wrote it. So, who is Emma JJ? Can you tell us a bit about her?
Emma JJ is a 15-year-old who's in care. She's been a looked after child for most of her life and has gone from foster care to foster care. So she's a little bit of an insecure person who's struggling with life a little.
And why is the title The Dangerous Dance?
Because it reflects partly her life, which has been full of danger, but also the fact that she loves to dance, so it's got those two things together. There is a third thing, but I'm not going to talk about that because it's a spoiler.
Right, okay. So what made you want to write about a looked after child?
Well, I was a clinical psychologist. I worked as a clinical psychologist for quite a long time, and I developed a specialism in fostering and adoption, partly because I have my own adopted children, but also because I used to be a foster mother. And it intrigues me and worries me that these children are some of the most needy people psychologically. They have lots of problems like anxiety and depression, and they're overcoming trauma. And yet, when I started as a psychologist, psychologists weren't involved, it was just the social workers. So I went on a sort of crusade and wrote lots of stuff about adopted children and foster children, and it sort of went from there, my interest, and so that's the main reason why I write about Emma. Yes.
And we definitely see Emma going through all sorts of things in the book, and we see some of her trauma, and we see some of the ways that she starts to deal with that as well.
Yes.
And one of the things that she does that I love is that she writes these handwritten lists, because this book is a diary format, and at the end of the day sometimes she writes this list, which in the book are handwriting. You can see her handwriting. Are you a lists person? Do you find lists helpful?
I'm not as much of a list person as my older sister, who writes a list for everything she does, but I do have general lists for days and for things to remember, which mostly go in my writing diary because that's the place I look most. So yes, I'm a list maker, but not fanatical.
Do you think you have anything else in common with Emma?
I can be quite anxious. So there is that. So I've found lots of strategies to help with that when I am anxious, particularly my thoughts. So that's in common with her. But I also love to dance. And I used to have dance lessons up until I was 11, when I was a child. And unfortunately, when I went to secondary school, they stopped because I couldn't get to the classes. And I've always wanted to dance, and my granddaughter is a dancer, and she said to me, "Come on, Granny, go to adult lessons." So I do, and I love it. So that's one thing I've got in common with Emma.
Oh, that's lovely. I really love the way that you can see Emma processing things and starting to deal with things, and you've just mentioned having different ways to cope with anxiety. Right. Do you have any advice for young people who might read this book and feel that they've got lots in common with Emma?
Well, I think the other thing about Emma is she finds people to talk to. This hasn't always been the case in her backstory, as it were, but in this book you see that she uses her foster mother to talk to, and also her social worker in a slightly guarded way. So I would say if anybody's having extreme anxiety problems or has trauma that they need to overcome, that is a really good first step, because then that person can help you get any specialist help that you need. If you need to see a psychologist, or if you need to just talk to the school counsellor, or whatever you need at that time. So, yeah, that's my advice, really.
And
Act on it.
Has a best friend that she talks to as well, doesn't she?
Yes, Cass is the best friend, and Cass does support her a lot. But when you only talk to your friends, sometimes you get some mixed advice, or sometimes people will say, "Don't be so silly," and walk away. However much they care for you, they might not have the skills. So that's why I'm saying
Yes.
talk
Although
to others.
Cass has a particular reason for being able to understand some of what Em goes through, but that would be another spoiler, so we'll let people read the book to find out
Yes.
what that would be.
Yes, they do support each other quite a lot.
Yes. So Emma writes about her experiences in her diary, and the whole book is in a diary format. Why is that?
Well, first of all, I love writing in the first person. I think as a clinical psychologist, I've very much had to work out what people are thinking and how they're behaving and everything. So that suits me as a writer, to actually put myself in the place of the protagonist. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is to keep me on track, because I'm a little bit chaotic and things pop into my mind all over the place. So if I've got it in a form where there is a natural regulator, that's easier for me. But on the other hand, it's quite intense writing it like that. So I have to try and pull back a little bit. But I think overall it works for this young person.
Have you written any other books apart from Dangerous Dance?
Yes, this is my 5th novel. But before I was even writing novels, as a clinical psychologist, I wrote 4 books on working with children. So working therapeutically through fairly ordinary games and fairly ordinary conversations, but helping those children who find it very hard to talk to a therapist. So those 4 were written as Angela Hobday, which was my working name, and this one is Annie Try, and so are my other novels. Partly because I wanted to keep them separate. I didn't want anybody to think I was writing case studies. These are complete fiction. So one of them I wrote when I was doing my master's degree in creative writing, and then I went on to do 3 novels for Incident Apostle, which are the Dr. Mike Lewis series, and these novels focus on a clinical psychologist. You always use what you know, and he has his own problems, but he also has some extraordinary clients that have their own adventures. And so there's mystery in them, and there's a little bit of romance, and there's a story, but there's also bringing up what it's like to see a psychologist, and what it's like to have a grave problem with anxiety or OCD or whatever it is in the book.
And you mentioned that you did an MA.
Yes.
Did you write at all as a teenager? Were you sort of into writing or reading even when you were Em's age?
I did write as a teenager. I've always written little short stories, little bits, and some poetry. I'm hopeless at poetry, so I've looked back at them and I thought, oh my goodness. But I've always written a little bit as I went along. And when I was reading stories to my children, I'd often depart from the script and make them very personal to them. And Susie would climb on the back of Prince Charming's motorbike and roar into the sunsets, that sort of thing, So yes, so I've always had it in me, I think.
Do you have any advice for teenagers who might want to become writers?
There are other ways into writing. There's journalism, there's working for a publishing company, and there's advertising. There are other ways as well. And for most people, I would say once it's their career, they are doing 2 things. They're working by day and they're writing in the evening and at weekends. I would say if you're passionate about writing, carry on writing. Write for itself. Write to enjoy it. And then your writing will be really sparky and nice and good because you've enjoyed doing it, and that will come through.
Did you have a favourite author or a favourite book as a teenager?
Not really. I read so much as a teenager. I've always been an avid reader. I used to, when I was younger, I would read the Noel Streatfeild ballet books. But by the time I was a teenager, I was more going into the library and finding what I wanted from the adult shelves. And I would read things like Three Men in a Boat and things like that. And various mysteries and all sorts of stuff, really. Yes, they've all gone right out of my mind now.
And how about now? What's on your summer reading list?
My list isn't written, there we go. But I have 2 boxes that are full of to be read. And my aim this summer is to actually reread the Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, the unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, and to read the other 2 books that go with it.
Like
so there's a
Queenie
Queenie Hennessy, and there's also one about Maureen, which I haven't got at the moment. Maureen is Harold Fry's wife. So I've got a birthday coming up. I'll have it by, by the time I'm ready to read it. I also read some Christian books, and in my TBR file I have got I have got Matt McCleary's book. I've also got Georgina Tennant's book, The God Who Sees You, because I went to her for her book launch, and that was a lovely occasion. I've also got Catherine Campbell, but alongside I've got some Alan Bennett short stories and various other people. So it's quite an eclectic mix.
And a full summer.
A full summer, yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about Emma JJ.
It's my pleasure.
Check out this book online. It's had loads of really good reviews, some of them from adults. It clearly doesn't appeal just to teenagers, but it's got a really wide appeal. It's a really it's a page turner, and would make a really good summer read. So maybe for somebody else's summer reading box, perhaps. And you can get hold of the book from our website or from your local Christian bookshop. If you go in and ask for it, you should be able to order it, in fact, from any bookshop.